Hello there my beloved Batties, and Merry Christmas to you, Happy New Year, and welcome to another episode of Truth Behind the Tale, the series where I take a look at some of our most famous fairy tales and delve into their real world historical and cultural origins. And today we are going to be taking a look at my favourite fairy tale of all time, the Snow Queen. I had to do this episode in full makeup and I am so happy at how this turned out. This took me so long and it turned out pretty much exactly how I pictured in my head, so I'm so happy. But anyway, on to the episode. The Snow Queen was first published, rather fittingly, at midwinter, 21st of December 1844, in the New Fairy Tales first volume, second collection by Hans Christian Andersen. It's one of his most popular and most highly acclaimed stories, and like practically all of his fairy tales, Andersen created the story himself, but there is one previous tale which he drew on, as well as potentially somebody real from his own life. By the early 1840s, he had already published 2 collections of fairy tales and several poems, and The Snow Queen was his longest and most ambitious to date. As with the Tinderbox, it was inspired partially by the Arabian Nights, but instead of reworking and borrowing stories in that collection as he had previously with the Tinderbox, this time he worked the story within a story motif to create something more sweeping and metaphorical than anything he had previously written. It's highly likely that Andersen had heard a Danish translation of a Norwegian fairy tale, either White Bear King Valemon or The East of the Sun and West of the Moon. Both of these feature an almost Beauty and the Beast type setup. A white bear takes the youngest daughter of a peasant as his wife in an enchanted castle, but under the condition that she never look at him when he came to her bed. Since there was no light in the chamber, she never managed to see him, but when her mother gave her some candles, since she had become convinced that he might actually be a troll, when she lit them, she found that the bear had actually transformed into a handsome prince. However, she spills some tallow on him by accident, waking him, and he told her that if she had waited a year before looking at his true form, he would have been free from his curse. But now he must go to the one who cursed him and become her husband instead. The girl decides to free him and sets out on a journey to the evil enchantress's castle, meeting several characters along the way who help her, and in the end she manages to find the prince, outwit his captors, and return home with him as her husband. Now that second half of the story changes from Beauty and the Beast type into something much more closer to the Snow Queen, Gerda travelling to rescue her friend Kay from the Snow Queen, who has kidnapped him and taken him to her palace. It has the same long journey, sacrifice and love for another to drive the main character onward, but in Andersen's tale it's mixed in with temptation, philosophy and Christian ideals, as well as showing quite plainly that wickedness does not necessarily go unpunished. Both the Snow Queen herself and the troll who created the evil mirror are never defeated and they are never seen again, but Gerda herself is put through a huge amount of pain and suffering to see her quest through to the end. It highlights an imbalance and even unfairness in life, which Andersen himself would have been quite aware of. His childhood and education were difficult, even traumatic at times, and by the time he was writing The Snow Queen, he still hadn't achieved the recognition that he so desperately craved. Even the ending of the story is quite platonic. There's no big battle or climax, just 2 children coming of age and managing to triumph over a powerful adult figure. This might be a reference to how Andersen hoped he could someday rise above all of those who had underestimated, ignored or humiliated him. But there is another unfairness from his life which it has been suggested played a part in the creation of the Snow Queen. In 1840, around the time that he would have been writing the story, the 35-year-old Andersen met and fell in love with the Swedish opera singer Jenny Lind, who was touring Denmark at the time. She's recently come back into popular consciousness thanks to The Greatest Showman. The two of them became very good friends, and Andersen wrote a fairy tale which was genuinely considered to be a tribute to her, The Nightingale. Because of this, she became known as the Swedish Nightingale. Andersen also wrote the fairy tales The Angel and Beneath the Pillar, which are also suggested to be inspired by her. Even though he loved her and even gave her a letter of proposal, Jenny Lind preferred to keep their relationship platonic, referring to him as a friend and a brother. Because she rejected him as a suitor, it is believed by biographer Carl Rosen that Andersen may have portrayed her as the character of the Snow Queen with a heart of ice. Indeed, he had many unrequited loves throughout his life, often because he fell for unattainable women such as Jenny Lind, and also experienced love for some men, though he never acted upon either. This might have resulted in frustrations which he could have referenced and dealt with by using his stories as masks. Either way, The Snow Queen remains one of Andersen's most recognisable and beloved works, even before Frozen came along and blew its popularity out of the water. But even that story, which is almost completely different from the original, even though I do still love it, does share the theme of the powerless discovering their own power, and that marginalised people can triumph, if not over evil, then over their own self-imposed limitations. It's summed up in one of what is, quite frankly, one of my favourite lines from any fairy tale. I can give her no greater power than she has already. Don't you see how strong that is? How men and animals are obliged to serve her, and how well she has got through this world, barefooted as she is. She cannot receive any power from me greater than she has now, which consists in her own purity and innocence of heart. Thank you very much for joining me for this episode of Truth Behind the Tale. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please give it a big thumbs up if you did. And please don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a single video. The next episode of Truth Behind the Tale will be coming on the last Tuesday of next month. I want to also thank you Bassies for joining me for another year of wackiness and craziness and bassiness of all levels. 2019 has been great. I can't wait for the Roaring Twenties to begin again, and I will see you all next year in 2020. So go build some snowmen, have some fun, and have a wonderful new year wherever you are in the world. Thank you very much. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Bassies. Bye! And delve into their real world historical, and there's a plane flying overhead. Shoo! Do you want to build a snowman? It doesn't have to be a snowman. Okay, bye.